The Dane and Derek Show is an uncensored, unfiltered podcast. Content warnings can be found in the episode description. Hello and welcome to the Dane and Derek Show, a podcast where two nerdy friends keep in touch and have a conversation or something. I'm Benig-Aiello, a writer, director, and pretty frequent D&D player these days. And with me as always is my buddy, Dane Fogdahl.
Hey, I'm Dane, writer, musician, podcaster, and lover of tabletop RPGs.
Wow, it's Monday when we're recording this, and we've definitely got a case of the Mondays going on, my friend.
Oh, we do. So yeah, I'm sorry if these episodes have low energy. I guess we're doing chill out version of this show right now. But honestly, I always get kind of hyped up about halfway through any episode. But
that'll be good for the episode 3 weeks from when this one comes out, because that'll mean that episode will be like...
That episode is going to be just chef's kiss.
Yes, chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
So Dane, in preparation for today's topic, what's the first thing you ever DM'd?
And when you say DM, do you mean dungeon mastering, right?
Yes, dungeon mastering, yeah. Running a game.
Running a tabletop RPG. I was 10 and I ran 3.5 edition D&D for my uncle and aunt, who introduced me to the game in the first place. It was a one-off adventure. I didn't plan on it being a one-off, but we didn't get to play again before my parents moved us away from Salt Lake City and back to the Front Range of Colorado. So it was only ever the one adventure, and it was very fun for me. I was very excited, and yeah. What about you? Only for a few years, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot that you grew up in Salt Lake. Yeah. First thing for me, I think I was 13 or 14, and I DM'd, I think, the module in the back of the 4th edition D&D playbook for Ryan Chen, Sean Chen, Matt Chen, Colleen Chen, and my brother Jason. That was the first thing I DM'd, and I don't really remember much about it other than, I think I skateboarded over and my brother got driven over for some reason, and we played, it was a hot summer day and we were all indoors just eating pizza. It was very fun. I don't remember if the adventure was good. I don't think I did a great job, because I don't think that game exactly lasted very long, but it was some sort of you're in a town, the town's being terrorized by a dragon up in the mountains, so you got to go up to the mountain and, kill the dragon. It was a very basic one-shot adventure from the back of the 4th edition book.
Hey, sometimes you got to go classic. Basically the only thing I remember about my very first game is that a princess literally got kidnapped. That was the adventure. Go save the princess. And then didn't even do it. Just eternally, just trapped halfway through the story.
Wow.
But yeah.
Tears. So, Dane, how did you know that you were ready to DM at the age of 10?
Because I wanted to. Honestly, I owned all the books. I'm looking at them right now up on my shelf. They're battered as hell. But I owned all the books. I read the Dungeon Master's Guide cover to cover tons of times. I just wanted to, yeah? I didn't know that I was quote unquote ready. And to be fair, I don't really think I got even close to being good at being a dungeon master until and I mean, what I mean by good is kind of objectively good, because you can be all a good dungeon master is a person who helps facilitate a good night with your friends. That is the only bar that I think is the real bar. The only thing that makes you a bad dungeon master, or in game master, I might say the other one, because it's a little broader, because D&D trademarks dungeon master. Anyways, the only thing that makes you a bad dungeon or game master is if you ruin people's nights, ruin people's time playing. if you are a jerk, like as a person, if everybody walked away having at least had a nice evening, or I say evening because like I just feel like most people play at evening, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then you did a good job. Like if that's all that's accomplished, great. But like what I say like objectively good is like I felt like the story was good and like I didn't get bogged down in mechanics or any number of things. Didn't happen so regularly as to like give me hiccups. Was the game I ran for you, Ryan, and the other guys. With the Lich King. Like that was the first one that I was like, oh, I think I did a good job. I think I did a really good job there. And that was 5-6 years later, you know? So like I don't know. Like all I think you need to know to be ready, and this is like probably going to like this isn't like good for topics, so we'll probably like roll off here is do you want to and do other people want to play with you? Like that's all you need. And maybe that's just me being like overly positive and just like let's do it. But that's kind of where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was the only one that at the time knew the game. Everyone else didn't know the game. So it made sense for me to logically Dungeon Master. I also owned all the books. So I was bringing the books, and it just, there were a number of factors where the thrust into the role of DMing made sense. I think that after that, I didn't really DM too much. I DM'd like a short little game that you played in, and then after that, Ryan took over, and then you took over. And then I basically didn't try DMing again until college. So that was like at least 3, maybe 4 years. Because I knew that there was something about the way that I DM'd that wasn't very satisfying for the people I was playing with and for myself. And I think I needed that time to kind of like realize like, oh, you kind of just have to let the players do whatever they want and guide them in a way. You can't really make them do any sort of like thing if they don't want to. I think one of my favorite one-off adventure dungeon mastering experiences was the villains campaign, like one shot we did that you Cordell and Sam Cass did with me that one summer.
That one was really fun.
Yeah,
That was really fun.
like I had a whole nother module planned, but then you all rolled in with these like villainously characters. Like they weren't like villains, they were just chaotic characters. And I was like, you know what? I'll just throw out everything I had planned because I don't think I could convince these characters to go rescue anybody. And it ended up being like a really fun, wild, zany, like world-ending romp, and it was pretty cool. It was like we played for like 4 hours, but it felt like a full campaign.
There was a whole arc there.
Yeah, between surviving the opening moments to persuading a whole village, was it, or intimidating a whole village into siding with you, to then conquering the neighboring city, to then unleashing like the end of the world and then remaking it. It's like the story that I think you all remade the world in your image or something. I forget how it ended.
We ended up being God Kings. It was wild.
Yeah, it's basically every villain's like wish.
Yeah. And so I think like there's no magic number, right? Like you can't be like, you have played a character in 3 campaigns, 2 to completion, and 1 for at least an additional 3 months, and then you are ready to be a dungeon master. There are some people who maybe can just like, some people will just pick up like the starter box and be totally ready to go and be like, no, I think I want to do this.
Yeah.
Having never touched it before. And there are some people who never really want to do that.
Yeah.
And so like I think it has more to do with what you want your role in these games to be, because spoiler, you don't even have to be a GM. You don't even have to have a game master, a dungeon master in your tabletop role-playing games. Spoilers, there are GM-less, dungeon master-less games out there that are amazing. You should go find them. Soapbox over. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Anyways, I don't think that there's like some prerequisite you can do. The only thing you can do is try, and also it's really important to know that you're gonna fuck up.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna make a mistake here, you're gonna make a bad call there, and that's fine. Like that's totally fine. You're fucking human. You're gonna do it. I've
Yeah.
been I've been dungeon mastering for 15 fucking years, and I'm not done learning. I'm not done making mistakes. The last campaign I finished, I look back on it. I was like, I would have done this differently. Oops, I should have made a slightly different call here. I should have prepared my characters, my players and characters a little bit better over there. It's just a learning process.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm like, I don't think there's a magic number or anything. The only thing to know is if you feel ready, and maybe you don't, but you're willing to make that like jump off the high dive anyways. You know?
Yeah, I think that's important too. Like just because you don't feel ready doesn't mean you still can't DM. Like you can. And I think that that's important. Like even if your brain tells you you shouldn't, you're not ready, but your heart tells you this is something I want, then you should go ahead and do it because you know it's better to DM a lot and get all those mistakes out early and figure out something and then go through the slow, arduous process of like relearning how to DM every time you DM.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I've definitely gone through like waves where sometimes I figure out how to deal with something, and then the next time I try and do something, it just doesn't work, and I have to kind of start all over again and rethink like how am I going to do that thing that I did so well last time. And that I guess is the other thing as a dungeon master, like you shouldn't compare yourself to any other dungeon master because I mean it's easier said than done, right? But you shouldn't compare
Mm-hmm.
yourself to like the Matt Mercers, the Brendan Lee
Oh my
Mulligans,
god,
the Anthony Birches, the Dane
Austin
Fogdals, the
Walker,
Derek Aiellos, yeah,
all
the
of
Austin
them.
Walkers of
Yeah,
the world. You shouldn't do it. You know, the Amy Vorpals, the Erica Ishis, you just shouldn't. You just shouldn't. And it's because like everyone that DMs has their own way of DMing, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time to figure out how you like to DM and GM, and that's like comparing yourself to that is only going to make you a worse DM. And I think that it can set an unfair expectation of yourself, you know?
totally. And I mean, like, also, even if you are like if you're like the person who kind of got like handed being the dungeon master, like everybody else like was like, I really want to play characters, and you're like, oh okay, I'll do this. It's gonna be fine. Like that's also a fine reason to be the dungeon master. Like there's no bad reason to do it. And I'm gonna second what you said about like about Matt Mercer, like and folks. I know Matt Mercer isn't the only great one out there, but he's just far and away the most famous of them. Um, yeah, like I love what like Critical Role and all these other things have done for like tabletop RPGs in general. And like I have a podcast, like like, but maybe the worst thing that it's ever done is that I feel like some people are just like, I'm not ever going to be Matt Mercer. I'm just not. And that's the standard, especially since all my friends watch Critical Role or any number of things, and they expect that that's what this is gonna be, you know.
Right.
And
And
I
that
think
can be
that's
very
really
difficult.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I will always sort of hold to is that you're right. Everybody has like a different sort of style and things that they're good at and things that they're bad at, and like I think that anybody can be amazing because on top of it, maybe you're right. Maybe Matt Mercer is just a little bit of a better natural storyteller and performer than you are. But here's the thing that he will never ever be able to give your players: their story. You are going to be the weaver, and not even the weaver, but the facilitator and guide and all these other parts of their story. And that is on some level probably always going to outweigh whatever happens on Critical Role. It's going to be personal. It's going to mean a lot to people. Hey, for all you players out there, thank your GMs and DMs once in a while, though. Seriously, like
Yeah.
they work really hard, and it's sort of like this. There's like a conscious side of it too, like where you're like, did I do good? What happened?
Yeah. Real quick, shout out to my dungeon master, Phil. Happy, a little over 1 year of DMing the game that I just stepped off of, but I hope there's still leftover cake that you're enjoying.
Yeah, I'm going to give my shout out. Shout out to my partner Gracie, who's an amazing GM for me, or she's actually a dungeon master. My goodness. Shout out to Kat, she's my other game master, and shout out to Natalie, who has been a game master for me in the past, and I love those games too.
Yeah, buy your game master cake.
Buy your game master cake, and also like. So often I've walked away from games and people are like, that was great. And like, they meant it. They really meant it. Like, I'm actually thinking back to like our game with the Lich, and like you guys would leave and you like, it'd be so clear to me that you guys did have a good time. You're like, that was awesome. Great. Thanks. Blah, blah, blah. And you disappear and I'd be like, I need feedback, but what worked, what specifically, so I can do more of that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is kind of, it's not like it. No, it is. It is an art form.
You know, that is a good point though. Like if you're a new DM or GM and you're struggling to kind of figure out like what to do, like ask your players like, hey, how are you feeling about your character's growth? You know, how are you feeling about this thing that happened? What do you think your character's going to do here? Or what's your character's, like tell me about this thing in their backstory, and kind of squeeze those other like non-in-game facts out of players to kind of give you more material to work on, because every player loves it when like an NPC from their past that they didn't expect was going to show up shows up because they built it into the game, or like a player expresses, I really want this particular sword, and then they get that particular sword like towards the end of the game. Like that's fun. That's a good way to that's like a good like DM pro tip.
Yeah, so like I think you need to be in communication between you're being if you're a player, talk to your GM. If you're a GM, talk to your players, ask questions, ask for feedback, ask for like constructive feedback. Like, just maybe you and I should have a conversation about what feedback looks like.
Yeah.
But I would say don't just open the doors for people to just tell you every little thing that they didn't like, because that will feel terrible and not helpful in the end. I would seriously advise asking specifically for what works and build on that, rather than just looking for what's broken and trying to fix it necessarily, or at least like find a nice balance between those two,
Yeah, and to the broken things, it's not like it physically exists. You can actually just remove the broken things from game and replace it with a functional thing.
Yeah, and I mean, something I wish I'd learned a long time ago, with being a game master and being a player, is that it's really okay to like mess with the world, Like it's not a fixed thing. Like I'm thinking back to a little while ago, Gracie was running a Dragon Age campaign for me and some people, and my character's brother showed up, and it went in a really weird way because I wasn't really ready for it. And afterwards I talked to her and I was like, that got really intense, and that's just not what I was looking for at all. Could we just just like kind of axe that from the canon and move forward, like, because it's a little harder with like a podcast. So like in that case, I tend to try and be a lot more careful and like really talk to people beforehand if something is coming up, make sure it's close to what they want. Basically, I was like, it's not, nobody's gonna be upset really. Like, we'll just change it and then have a good time, right? In the same way, I also wish as a player, I had known that I could go to my GM and be like, hey, this is the character arc I'm planning on. Like, this is what I'm going to do. you down for this? Can we make this happen? You know, it's great that way. But I have a question, kind of bringing it back around to when are you ready to GM? Since you and I are pretty much in consensus on like, whenever the fuck you feel ready, man. Like we don't have the answers. Like what the fuck, you know? What are 3 things you wish you'd known going into GM being a dungeon master? And or what are like 3 pieces of advice you would give a new dungeon master?
Okay, 3 things 3 things I wish I knew. I think right off the bat, I think I wish I knew a little bit more about like player types, like, you know, like power gamers, role players, puzzle gamers. That way I could create a more balanced game for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you don't know that there's different player types that exist, you end up just kind of, sometimes the game is good for others, sometimes it's not, and it can be very wishy-washy. And you kind of, and like as the dungeon master, like a part of it is to keep people engaged, and part of that means having a challenge for everyone. Which then brings me to my second thing. Wish I'd known that not all challenges need to be combat, because combat is not at all fun. I mean, it can be fun, but it's not fun when it's only combat.
Mm-hmm.
Puzzles,
variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, exactly. Puzzles, complex character conversations, those are just as interesting as combat.
Mm-hmm.
And so not being afraid to, force the players to haggle with a merchant, or force the players to, force is a bad word. But instead of having a combat encounter planned, the players encounter, say, a traveling merchant, and they have to haggle prices, and that could go a million directions, and that can be interesting. Or, like the characters have to talk their way, like, to get, like the characters could just spend an entire session trying to talk these guards into letting them into the city. Something like that. I wish I had known that is a good alternative. And the last thing is, I wish I had known a little bit more psychology in general. Like,
fair.
Something that I'm a really big fan of is table dynamics and arranging players based on who's gonna, have side banter versus not.
Mm-hmm.
I often will collect people's character sheets at the end of a game, and then arrange the character sheets around the table in the order of which I would like them to sit for the next game. And it varies depending on what I think will make the most sense for the session.
Mm-hmm.
And, using a round table instead of a square table, I think it does make a difference when you can see everyone eye to eye. And, like making sure to address other players who are soft spoken. That way they have a chance to speak and they're not just overpowered by loud players.
Yep.
Those kinds of things. I think I would have appreciated knowing early on versus having to kind of just draw my own conclusions about it. And 3 pieces of advice. Don't be afraid to improvise.
Oh, yes.
And then followed up with, don't improvise too much. And the last one is, if you're going to improvise, at least know where they're going to land. Because if you know where they're going to land, you don't have to worry so much about what happens in the actual improvisation, so long as they land. If you don't know where they're going to land, the improvisation can go all sorts of places and often leads you to rule number 2, which is don't improvise too much, because then you'll end up improvising way too much, and then the game will just get completely off track. And that's no fun, because then it's more work for the dungeon master to keep track of. It's more stress because you introduced elements or things that you didn't necessarily plan for, and the players just kind of become confused. So it's tempering that. You have to temper the improv, but you do have to be okay with improv.
Totally.
How about you?
Okay. 3 things I wish I'd known. The first thing I wish I'd known is I'm trying to find the right way to word this, is play with the people you want to play with.
Yeah.
This is less a thing about like, because when the first time I GM'd, I played with people I did want to play with. And this is more just like something I wish I'd known earlier, which is like, you do not have to play with everybody. If you are a DM or a GM, odds on you will get asked if to join your game way more often than you would think. Like this was like a perpetual problem through high school, or not high school. Well, also a little through high school, but more
Yeah.
in college, where I would just get approached, like especially in choir, I would just get approached by people like, you play Dungeons and Dragons, you're the GM, right? And I'd be like, yeah, and like, can I come play? And I'd be like, maybe. We're kind of in the middle of something, like I'd have to like, kind of like push back on people
Right.
because you are never going to be able to please everybody. Like there are always going to be more players out there in the universe than there are games you can run. And if you kind of accept in people who you didn't really want to play with, that you kind of got you guilted yourself into playing with, it's not going to be as much fun for you. That's super
Yeah.
important.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I wish I'd known is you don't need a million. You don't need to know everything. It kind of goes with your improv thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to know everything. Like, you don't need to know every single detail of the world. Like I don't know if you remember when I GM'd for you guys in high school, but I would come to every session with binders full of information. And really most of that information was just maps and city facts and like just raw information, um, such that I could improvise based off of whatever you guys wanted to do. Like if you're like, oh, what's this random thing on this corner of the map? I could be like, I know exactly what that is. Don't you worry, um,
Mm-hmm.
so I wish I'd known that like there is more space for improvisation than there was. Um, and the third thing I wish I'd known is it matters if I had a good time too, as a GM.
Ooh, yeah, that is a big one.
I cannot tell you how many games I've run where I was just like, afterwards, I was like, that fucking sucked for me. Like, no thanks. That wasn't a good time. But I'm going to be back next week. Yay. You know? And it's so hard to tell because in reality, that wasn't the majority of games I ran, by any stretch of the imagination. And so, like, I was just like, it must have just been a fluke, and then would keep kind of staying in it. But 3 pieces of advice, because we're running low on time, so I'm gonna power through. The 3 pieces of advice I would give is there's a lot of pressure to prepare, meaning like what I was saying, like come in with a binder full of maps and notes and things. Prepare as much as you need to feel comfortable. If you're running a prepared adventure and you feel like, and you're like, I won't be comfortable running this unless I've read the prepared event, the pre-made adventure 3 times, you read it 3 times. If you feel like you just need to skim it, great. That's awesome. If you're making your own game and you're like, I really actually do need every single map or I'm not going to feel comfortable, then you make every map. If you just need a world map and just like 3 random things, and half a page of notes, you need that. Like, prepare to your comfort level. It will make all the difference. But don't do any more and don't do any less. Another basic piece of advice is if you don't know a rule, like if you're dungeon mastering for the first time and suddenly there's a grapple happening and you cannot for the life of you remember how grappling works, don't worry about it. Like literally just be like, I can't quite remember exactly how grappling works. So for now, both of you roll strength and whoever gets the highest wins. Done. And just be like, I'll look that up next time. Like be more willing to be flexible with the rules. In short, what I basically mean is don't sweat the small stuff. Just kind of make up a determination if you need. Like don't like
Right.
know the rules as best you can, but literally nobody can remember every single rule. And then the third piece of advice for a first time GM is go small with your first adventure. And I'm not like your first session even, like, and I'm not even talking like, oh, don't plan on doing a whole campaign your first time. I'm just like, whatever you want, but just for your very first time, I know it sounds silly, but come up with just the simplest plot hook. It doesn't have to be complicated, you know? Like princess gets kidnapped. Like it's very classic, and maybe put a twist on it so that it's not such a like kind of sexist trope. I was 10, I'm sorry. Um or whatever, but like just a simple little plot thing, just a conflict that your characters can and are in position to resolve. Like and make it clear that on what they need to accomplish. But don't make it like super complicated. Make it manageable for you. You know, and then it's just if you've underprepared, it's a short session, and then the next time you're like, okay, I know I can handle more. Um, don't don't I don't mean to say don't reach for the stars, but don't go for the world ending campaign right off the bat.
Yeah.
Small problem. It makes all
Yeah.
the difference. A few
Yeah.
non-player characters, so people you as the GM want to inhabit and play. Maybe it's a fun little villain, like a weird angry goblin, who needs the players to go get their grandfather's pocket watch back from a thief. Like just something little. Don't make sure that you can handle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Start small, build big.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, man. This was good. This was nice. I think, if any of you folks listening out there have questions, you can tweet at us. We have a show handle,
We do.
uh, at Dane in Derek. Just Dane and then the letter N and then Derek. Go ahead and tweet at us if you have questions that you'd like us to answer about like running tabletop games. We'd probably be more than happy to do another episode on that or something. Because we're going to do another D&D or tabletop episode, so that would be cool. We'll gladly answer questions if we didn't cover anything in this episode today. But yeah,
Totally.
cool. Well, I hope you all that are listening get a chance to DM at some point. And I wish you the best of luck. But that's all for this week. You can see what movies I'm watching on Letterboxd at Benig-Aiello. And Dane, where can we find you and your work?
You can find me on Twitter at Dane_Fogdoll. And you can listen to my show Diceology, which is spelled like the science of dice, on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. It's a tabletop role-playing RPG show, so you can listen to me doing a ton of GMing and game facilitating.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks for hanging with us, everyone.
Catch you later.